going?
Well, you know what? It's not going great for either of us, as we've now
No.
had to record this multiple times because we still fuck up the audio. How many years
I'm,
later?
you
We
know,
are not
no,
engineers. That is for damn sure.
no matter how much we will do in our life, we will never be audio techs.
We are very bad at this.
We're terrible.
Terrible. And good thing we don't need a lot of external validation because we just know we suck.
The worst.
The worst. But today's episode is about external validation.
I would really appreciate some external validation with the audio tech, because it would mean that I'm doing a good job. Whoa.
Yeah. Miles, let us know.
Help us.
Help us,
Help
please.
us.
Today's episode, external validation. Why you may need it, what could become problematic about it, what the fuck's happening in our culture and society today. Start us off, Jen.
Oh wow. Okay. I mean, it's a loaded topic to get into. No, but I think one of the first things that I think is important to dive into is how natural it is to need external validation from a very early age, that it's the way in which we understand ourselves in context. It's the way in which we learn to figure out who we are, is we look for that external validation from our primary caregivers. And, we say, am I doing a good job? How am I, am I safe in the world? Can I do this? Right. And so we look to our parents to say, or, caregivers in some way, to be able to say, yes, you can do this. Yes, you're doing a good job. Yes, I see you. I can validate who you are as a person. And if we're getting that consistently, we can over time internalize that to be able to give that to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that what happens is that if we're not getting that consistently, then we start to look for it in other ways, and we take that need into adulthood of still feeling like I don't feel settled or safe in the world. And so I need to look for external validation in order to feel safe and in order to feel settled in who I am, because I never received that growing up, or I didn't receive it consistently. So I'm still looking for it. I'm still looking for that need because I never got to the point where I was internalizing that. And I was able to say, like, I am safe. I am doing right. I am doing a good job. I can keep going. Because I wasn't receiving that. So I just want to put it out into the world that it's just such a natural thing to need.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny, right? Because I'm sitting here thinking about, like, as a parent, it's like, what's the line, right? And so here's why this is so confusing. Are you ready? The 2015 study suggests that narcissistic traits such as entitlement and requiring validation in adulthood may develop due to too much praise and overvaluation in childhood. And then there is a 2016 study suggests that emotional validation from mothers, especially in childhood, builds emotional awareness. And then there's a 2018 study.
So many studies. They're so
founded
busy.
that mental health conditions such as borderline personality disorder may result from having an emotionally invalidating childhood environment. So then you have parents listening to this episode and figuring out, they're like, what do I do? if I validate them too much, they'll be a narcissist. And if I don't validate them enough, they'll have emotional instability. And what are you supposed to do? And then I have certain models of education that say, oh, praise your child all the time. Oh, great, great, great. I'm so proud of you. Good job, good job, good job. Then you have other models where they're saying, oh, just narrate. Don't say good job. Just say, oh, look, you did move the red ball. You moved the red ball. And you're just supposed to narrate. And so I think that there is this really confusing thing about, like, okay, so what's enough and what's not enough? Because that's sort of what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're sort of talking about extremes on any spectrum. Is the reality is children need emotional validation and desire emotional validation, and same thing with adulthood. And everyone likes it.
Yes.
There's nobody who doesn't feel good with. Now, there's some people that feels like overdue. It feels like uncomfortable, like I'm not good at receiving that. But a genuine, like, validation and compliment, like, every human wants.
Absolutely.
It is. That's just human nature. I was saying, before we had to get rid of our other recording, where you ever seen those funny videos of, like, it'll be like a group of people like clapping about a football game or something, and then there's a baby that's like, yeah.
Yes.
Everyone's
Yes.
clapping for them, right?
Yes.
And children from a young age are doing clapping and want you to clap back and get excited when you clap for them. And so this is, I mean, even I was just talking to someone the other day who their child is doing OT for eating. They're like having some eating stuff. And one of the main things the OT is having them do is celebrate every time they eat. Um, and so you get a lot of cross wires and a lot of mixed messages,
Absolutely.
right? About like what's the right thing to do here.
You know, it also made me think about, I know you're off Instagram, but I'll still bring this up. There are like those accounts, I don't know if it's Instagram or TikTok, it's probably all the same. Um, how there's those accounts where like someone is just like driving down the street and they like yell out to someone and give them a compliment.
I have
And
seen this.
I get so hooked on those videos because you're just watching the joy that
Yeah.
it brings to people to hear such a compliment from, especially from a stranger.
Yeah.
And so you see the impact that external validation has. And I think, you know, to want it is so natural. It's just a matter of, do you need it, right? Like
Yeah.
wanting it is one thing. Do you need it in order to feel settled and secure within yourself?
All right.
And how can you give yourself the internal validation, right? So that you're not constantly looking for it from other people
Yeah.
in order to feel secure.
I think because the other part I have seen, you know, when you look at like relational and group dynamics, you watch this thing where one person gets a compliment and then it can really hurt someone else to not get it, right? So like we've seen this happen before where you like give someone praise and then someone else immediately takes that as a dig against them. And maybe that was something that actually happened in your family growing up. Maybe your parents weaponized praise as a way to ignore you. That's like a real thing that can happen, right? But what we're talking about is like, we'll start off with the first two questions, how to not need it. And so let's talk about that difference between external validation and internal validation, right? Obviously,
Yes.
external validation, someone from else, internal coming from ourselves. One of the ways that we move away from external validation is to learn how to give ourselves internal validation, right? When we transfer that over, okay, how do I learn to feel good about myself when I do stuff and to trust myself? Because that's the thing is we typically trust other people more than we trust ourselves. And that comes from a very, very, very early childhood thing of I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I'm 1 year old and I'm looking for other people to tell me. And then we keep doing that, right? So if I don't have a ton of trust in self, external validation is going to feel amazing. Or if it's superficial external validation, likes, followers, comments on like very, very physical, superficial things, those are very fleeting and they're not going to take me or last me very long.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm really stuck on the vision of a 1-year-old saying, like, what the fuck am I doing with myself? That's all I can think about.
But like, right? Like,
Okay,
don't
but
you
it's
think?
true. It is true.
I
You
mean,
know,
and
like,
here's how I think, right? Anytime Millie falls, oh my God, here's like an example. Last week,
oh, I feel like I know where you're going,
yeah,
but
okay.
continue.
So we're on a, if you have children, you know that taking a walk around the block is a 2-hour activity, which should be a 10-minute thing. And so where she's getting really into scootering, she's on her scooter, she's wearing her helmet, of course. My husband is all about safety first, don't you worry. Wearing a scooter or wearing her helmet on her scooter. We start going downhill a little bit, and she can't figure out the turning, right? So she's just like, I don't know, runs right into someone's mailbox, falls, hits her head on the mailbox. And when she hits, the helmet took the impact, but it actually moved up a little bit. And so then she ended up falling and hitting another thing here. First thing she does is look at me. Is my mom going to freak out? Because if mom freaks out, I got to fucking freak out, right? So I stay really calm and I'm like, okay, let me look at your head. And it's bleeding. it hit fucking, yeah. She hit someone's mailbox that had like an ADT security thing
Perfect.
that was screwed in, and she
had like ADT in her.
She had the top of a screw literally indented into her little head. And thankfully, we are next door to we go right next door to our other good neighbors, who's a doctor.
Great.
Call her up, doctor to call. You got to come outside, come look at Millie's head. Everything's fine. I already had her tetanus. Not a big deal, right? But in the moment, she was looking at me for the emotional safety of it. So it's true. Like we think about like a 1-year-old that are kind of looking around of like, what are my caregivers doing and acting on here?
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of think of the same thing, right? Like, and I do this with humor. do people think I'm funny, right? That's like a big way that I get external validation is we were at a networking lunch last week. I made a ketamine joke. You really never know if those are going to land or not in a group
And
of
it did.
professionals. And
Luckily,
it
it
landed
did.
really well. It was a real risk. You never actually know when you pull up into a stuffy networking thing. But that was external validation. And let me tell you, I rode that the whole time.
Of
I
course.
got like at least
Took you
3
the rest
hours.
of time. Took you the rest of time.
Like 3 hours of confidence from those laughs. Let me tell you.
You know what I think is really impressive people who can do stand-up comedy. I think that's incredible because
Yeah.
you're not always getting those laughs.
And that's
Like you have
defeating.
to be real secure with yourself and your humor to
Yes.
keep going if you're up there and you're not getting those laughs. If I was the kid in class, or like the kid, if I'm like at a show, if the teacher makes a joke, or if I am like, ha ha.
Of course you were. Of course you were. Jen is everyone's cheerleader and hype girl. That is definitely, I believe
I
that 100%.
know, just because I want them, I'm like, like I want to give this to you in some way, but like,
Yeah.
who knows if they really need it. I am like I'm not front row, definitely. I'm in the back, like, ha
Yeah.
ha ha, while everyone else is talking. And so, but that is an idea that maybe I'm projecting, of like other people are needing this external
Yes.
validation from me.
Remember our first day of grad school when they were like, tell us something about yourself, and you said like, I really want people to feel comfortable around me, and then another girl made fun of you.
Yes. And
for the
now that
record for the record, that girl dropped out of the program 2 months in.
but also for the record, I think that was, I grew so much from that point to understand that that's not my responsibility.
Yes.
But whoa, did that take a lot of work.
Well, and okay, so well, and it's but it's this other part that I'm thinking about. Like, we're not just talking about caregivers; we're talking about someone like older or someone we respect, right? That like we would when we would sit in supervision, I would always want my supervisor to like tell me like fucking like pat my ass and tell me how goddamn good I'm
Yeah.
doing. Um, and I think that we want that from people because we want
Yeah.
other people to tell us that we're doing okay in this world.
And I think the times in which we feel, or the things that maybe we feel more insecure in, it's more likely that we're going to want that external validation, right? Like where, especially in grad school, right? When we were very green as therapists, we're looking for someone to say, no, you're doing a good job. When we're kind of that 1-year-old, when you're like a green therapist, not knowing what you're doing, kind of wobbling around saying like, am I doing okay? You're wanting that validation so much more because you
Yeah.
don't feel settled in what you're doing yet. And I think, the times in your life where you feel maybe the most insecure in what you're doing, it's more natural to want that external validation because it's so much harder to give it to yourself. So the times in which giving yourself internal validation is really challenging because you haven't gone through something before. If you're in a new job or you're in a new relationship, right, where you don't have the ability to give yourself that internal validation yet, it's so much more likely that you're going to want it and look for it externally.
Yeah. Okay. So somebody said how to not need it. I don't think you're ever gonna not. You might not need it, but you're still gonna desire it. So let's make sure we understand the difference between wants and need. Right. So how to not need it. Okay. So what are the other ways I get those needs met? What are the other ways that I feel secure in how I'm functioning, what I'm doing, and to understand what is the function of why am I seeking external validation? Am I seeking it because it gives me a high for 3 hours? Well, you can just go learn a new hobby and create some mastery, and that'll also give it to you too, right?
Yeah.
Like, so do I need to replace it and understand the position behind it? So, how to not need it's going to come from also learning to give it internally. That's what we're talking about here, right?
Yes.
To really work on that internal system of validating yourself and giving yourself self-compassion. Hey, I am human. And so if I'm not doing my best, if I'm not doing this stuff, like that's really normal too.
And giving yourself the acknowledgement of what is it that I'm maybe not feeling so secure in? Like, what do I not feel settled in right now? And is this okay? Is it okay for me to not feel settled in this one domain? Is it something that I am going to move out of? Am I going to create more mastery in this specific area of my life? Is it just because this is new? You hear about this in new relationships all the time, where when you're in a new relationship and you're looking for that validation, it is so natural to want that when you really care about something or someone. And,
That's why we're
you
so
know,
obsessed with labels.
exactly.
Please tell me that you're my partner. Please tell me that we're exclusive, right? Like, because this feels so important. And this is where I get security within the heteronormative framework.
Right. Right. And it's natural to want that because it's new and you're not feeling secure. Or if your marriage is struggling and so, right, if you're ever in a point of time in your relationship where you're not feeling settled or secure, it
Mhm.
is natural to be looking for that, and it's okay. And I think so often we say to ourselves, like, am I needy for wanting that? Is there
Mm.
something wrong with me? Is this because I've gone through all this shit in the past? No, like sometimes in a new relationship, you're just going to need that. Or if you're feeling insecure in your relationship, you're not feeling settled or close, you might be looking for that more. And so
Yeah.
just acknowledging what's underneath that need for external validation can
Mhm.
also be really significant.
So let's talk about anxiety then too, because if you're someone who is highly anxious and especially highly anxious in relationships, you might grab onto this, right? When you do not feel grounded in yourself, when you feel highly anxious, you are looking for something else to ground and root you.
Yes.
The issue is then that person can take that away and it doesn't last for forever. And so it's going to be a temporary relief that's not going to help you long term.
Yeah. Because when you're anxious, you're feeling so out of control.
Yeah.
And when you're looking to soothe that anxiety with someone else, that thing that you're getting is also out of your control, right?
Mhm.
So you're trying to control these feelings of feeling out of control by something else that's also out of your control. And if you keep looking for it externally, that will never be in your control.
Yeah.
You're never going to be able to get it on demand. The thing that you can get on demand is the internal validation,
Yeah.
your ability to self soothe, your ability to work through those feelings of anxiety. But if you're someone who feels really anxious and looks for that self soothing outside of yourself, you're always going to be chomping at the bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, so brings up to a really good question, right? Okay, so let's take an example here. I'm also trying to be highly aware if we record this about me talking. I'm trying to not talk a ton of shit on social media because I also am understanding that tons of people create amazing relationships on social media.
Yes.
And there's a part of me that keeps wanting to make snark comments about likes and follower counts. And so what's the like
Well,
in between there?
I think that we say this all the time, but it is important to highlight that everything we talk about is not black or
Yeah.
white. Like everything exists on a spectrum. And just because there's one piece of social media doesn't mean it doesn't have incredible
Hmm. Hmm.
pieces about it too that allow you to connect with people, build your business, like really be able to um be vulnerable too on social media. I think there's
Yeah.
space for that too. And so I think that's a good disclaimer to be able to say that nothing is black or white when we talk about it.
Yeah. It's because I see this, right? As you all know, I love Reddit. And like the people that talk, if you hang out in Instagram comments, people are fucking mean to each other.
Yeah.
If you go to Reddit, people are so nice. If there's like someone who like says something like slightly out of line on Reddit, or like there's some like miscommunication, people are so quick to be like, oh, I'm really sorry, I misunderstood you. Like, now I understand what you're saying. Like, I've never seen anything like it because I never saw that on Instagram.
What do you
And
think the
on
difference
Facebook, people are
is?
assholes to each other
Yeah.
too.
What do you think the difference is?
Um, uh,
Do you think because it's
n-
less like personal, people are
yes.
posting? Yeah.
Yeah, it's not it's more anonymous,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not personal pictures of myself. It's not like usually like my own people, like it's like it's like you get to be who you want to be, not who you're trying to be on Instagram. Does that make
Oh,
sense?
yeah. Well, and I can imagine that it's less, you would get less defensive if a comment doesn't feel so personal to you, right? If
Yes.
it's not like about under a picture of you doing something.
Exactly, right? Like it's like we're all sort of here on this like common thread right, about infertility, and people, it's like very supportive. So yeah, I don't know, there's something about it that feels less performative, I guess,
Okay.
because it's also like not your picture and name,
Yeah.
right? Like, so there is something that I have just like, as someone who's sort of a lurker on all these things, that's like I can notice this difference. Um, but I also look, people that are so obsessed with the likes and the follows, to me it feels risky. That's what
Yeah.
it feels like to me. It feels scary and risky to me because it feels like it can all be taken away in a second. And that's what I think is really scary to me to think about. And it brings me back to something that Brene Brown talks about in The Gift of Imperfections, where she says that in her pocket, she has a list of 4 names, and it's the 4 people that will surround her with love no matter how much she fucks up. And I think that that is so much more significant, right? If I think about the people close to me in my life that are very, very important people to me, a compliment from them means so much more than somebody random on the internet.
Absolutely. And I think the social media stuff is so fleeting, right? Like that they're,
That's
first
my
of
fear
all,
for people. Yeah.
yeah. And I think whoever created social media, they're just geniuses because they play off our natural need for external validation. And so the question is how to not need it. Like there are apps that are specifically made to play off your survival need for external validation. Just
Yes.
so fucked up, but it's
But
just, it is, it
was
is
that how it started though? I don't think so.
no, but I think that,
It's what
it
happened.
developed into that, so I think it started with connection,
Yeah.
right?
I think
But
that's how all of this tries to start.
yeah, but part of connection ends up being external validation in a lot of
Ooh.
ways. And so I think that we get that quick dopamine hit from getting those likes, the follow requests, the comments. Um, and it's risky because we're always going to be looking for more because it's so quick. It's not something you can internalize in the same way as someone who you love and you feel really safe with giving you a compliment, who really knows who you are.
Yeah.
And so it's not the connection that I think we're really looking for or seeking. But our brain is telling us you need this and this will give that to you. And so it's
Mhm.
so quick. And I think that's where I love the word risky because I think it does end up being risky because you
Yeah.
can fall into a bit of a rabbit hole with it.
Yeah, yeah, that's what it feels like to me. Okay, so I know that I just went off on a tangent there, so
It's okay. I loved
da-da-da.
it.
Um,
Is that your tangent noise?
I guess so. It was
I
bad
loved it. I
though.
liked it. It was like a
Um,
drum.
I don't give me external validation for that. I should not do that again. Someone said how much is too much? I think it's different for everyone. Right? I think you should say to yourself, if I find myself, if I'm in a group of people and I'm trying really hard to get it, or if I'm fishing for it, it's probably too much.
Yeah, I would say, how much is it affecting your life? Like, are you able to give it to yourself, right? Is there a balance
Is it
in it?
sustainable?
Is
Yeah.
it sustainable, right? What's the reason why you're looking for external validation? Once again, is it because you're in a specific phase of your life? Or is it constant? Like, are you constantly needing it? Are you constantly looking for it? Do you never feel like you have enough? That
Mm,
would be my question. Are you always feeling like you need more and more and more in order to feel settled within
yeah.
yourself? If if your answer to that is yes, I always need it. I need more and more and more, or I start to feel sad, lonely, bad about myself, whatever start to notice the feelings that come up when you're not getting it. That I would say then you're using it in a way that we can start to look at and change, and you can start to more so internalize those feelings for yourself.
Yeah. Um, uh, someone, yeah. So, okay, example of when it's helpful and when it isn't, right? So let's go back to this a little bit. So if I find myself fishing for it, if I find myself that if my partner doesn't give it to me, I'm really upset, right? If I walk out in a new outfit or come get my hair done, yeah, sure. You of course want someone to say something that feels good for all of us. But if they don't, am I like devastated, like, wow, no one noticed that I got my haircut, right?
Yeah.
Like instead, walk in and be like, holy shit, I got my haircut. I love it. Do you like it? Don't I look good? Right? Like you can bring
Holy
that shit up.
shit. Barge into a room.
Right,
Holy shit,
but
I
you
got my
know that
hair
I would
cut
do that.
right now. Holy shit, everyone. I got my hair cut.
But I would do that and you know it.
1000%.
Because I
It's just,
gotta get my needs met.
I just love that picture. And if you don't do that the next time I see you in person, we're done.
I'm gonna chop off more of my hair just to do
Just to do
to
it.
have this
If you could give
interaction.
yourself like a bowl cut,
Yeah.
I would really appreciate it.
Stop. That would be well, it's listen, I had a mullet for most of my childhood, so no one
Oh,
was complimenting that haircut.
I don't know. Mullets were in back then. So you don't know that. Is it true? Is it true that no one was complimenting it? Maybe people were like, damn, look at that cool mullet. I was really into rat tails.
My brother, I think my brother had a rat tail. I'm gonna text him right after this.
I'm
I think he had a rat tail that also had a bead at the end of it.
no.
I don't know if that's true. I'm gonna ask him now.
Did you?
I can't remember if it was him or his best friends, but
That
one
makes
of
me
them
want to
had
die.
this. Yes. Your
Yeah,
brother didn't have a rat tail?
no, but he did have a mushroom cut. Do you remember
Well,
them?
no. Oh, that was hot. That's like JTT style.
Yeah, it was like very JTT, but we have very poofy hair in our family, so like, it wasn't the same. We were just a
Well,
poofy hair.
because yeah, also JTT had like the blonde tips and like it was like a
Exactly, the
whole thing,
frosted
right?
tips. But yeah, no,
Sexy.
rat tails were definitely in. I talked to my brother about that the other day. I was like, "Do you remember the time where I really liked rat tails when we were younger?" He was like, "Yeah, what was going on there?" I was like, "I don't know." We had a whole conversation about it. So moral of the story is there's something for everyone.
That's I don't know. Was that the moral of this story? What?
That's the moral of my story. So if you walk in with a bowl cut, okay, that's another. I'm gonna bring this back around. You ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I'd love to say save this one.
Okay. Because I think we got to talk about too the fact that just because one person can't validate you doesn't mean another one can't. Can. What's happening? Who am I? You know what I'm saying? So if you walk in with a bowl cut, right?
Hmm.
There might be 5 people in the room who have 5 different opinions about that bowl cut. One of those people might be, I fucking love a bowl cut. Your bowl cut looks beautiful.
Or
right?
I think the risk is that most people say nothing.
Right.
I think the thing is that we're all struggling with like the real. I keep saying risk because I think that is my feeling about external validation is that there is a risk if it's
Yeah.
that important to you that one, somebody shits on it. Two, they say nothing and you feel like isolated, right? Like
Only if you're already feeling insecure about
Yeah.
it, right? Because otherwise, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
I'm
also someone because of my own lived experience with the eating disorder and my professional experience with working with so many folks with eating disorders. The other thing is I see it as very risky to compliment certain stuff because it can
Yes.
often create a negative feedback loop of behavior, which is
Yes.
one of the reasons why I'm not going to comment on someone's body, right? I'm going to say like, oh, you look like you have a lot of energy or you look like really happy or right? Like those are all things that I would like be happy to compliment. But I think there was like certain people that especially when there was like intentional weight loss, they're really looking for external validation.
Yes.
And that's risky because sometimes they are not doing it in a healthy way. And I'm not
Yeah.
going to contribute to that.
I completely agree with you. And anytime I hear someone say
Yeah.
or comment in a positive way, oh, you look so great. Like, I am cringing because
Because you don't know what's going on with that person.
you don't know what's going on and you don't know how they're losing that weight. You don't know what's happening. But there's so many ways that can be interpreted too.
Yeah. But I think for certain people, like sometimes if they're doing stuff like that for external validation, that can feel crushing that somebody doesn't say anything about how you look because that's so important to you.
Mm.
You and I aren't like super into how we look, actually.
Right.
We're really into our business.
That's it. If someone says, I love your business, I am flying high. Flying high.
I am thirsty for more, baby.
Well, okay. That brings up another thing. Like when you're pouring yourself into something.
Yeah.
Right.
Risk.
Risk. But when you're pouring yourself into something to hear that it's acknowledged, right? It's kind of like at home. Like if you're pouring, I clean the homes, your partner comes home and they say, oh my God, it looks so beautiful in
Yeah.
here. And you're like, oh, it feels so good. This is acknowledged in some way.
Yeah.
It makes me think back to kind of what you were saying, how the Montessori way of kind of raising your children is to just narrate, and that
Mhm.
it's not about, oh, you're doing such a good job, but it's, I acknowledge you.
Yeah. You
I
clean the
can,
whole kitchen.
you clean the kitchen, like that in and of
Yeah.
itself. You don't have to say like, it smells amazing in here. You did such a
Yeah.
great job, but you clean the kitchen. Just the acknowledgement in and of
Yeah.
itself is validation.
Yeah. And I think, it's funny, my couples therapist calls it giving an attaboy. She always says, you're not giving Aaron enough attaboys. Um like, here, attaboy,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
like
yeah,
pat him on the back,
yeah, yeah.
right? And when it comes to your relationship, to be on the same page about what each other knows.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Like, so it's different for like Jen, you and I have a relationship. You know the places I might need like a little extra like
An
attaboy.
attaboy.
I know the places for you. And that's great. But if I'm looking for it from people that don't matter or who I'm never going to get it from,
Yeah.
let's talk about if you have a parent that is never going to give you those things and you keep looking for it
Mm-hmm.
and you keep hoping and praying they're going to give it to you one day. If I get as tiny as possible, my mom will finally tell me I'm pretty. If I graduate the top of my class, even with a mood disorder and wanting like and being totally fucking depressed, finally my parents will say something, right? Like, what is the reason of why I am chasing this and who is this about getting it from?
And with a parent specifically, right, that is a childhood wound that is coming up for you. I am looking for my parents to accept me. It is survival as a child to
Mm-hmm.
feel connected to your parents or your caregivers. And if you're not getting that, your nervous system is always heightened, right? So I'm going to keep changing this thing about me so that I can receive that from my parents finally, so that I can feel acceptance, so that I can make it through.
Yeah.
But the thing that we have to get to is that the reason why your parents can't give that to you is not because of who you are, it is because of them.
Yeah.
And the fact that they have not been able to give that to themselves. They have not internalized that
Yeah.
for themselves. Maybe their parents didn't give that to them. And this is how it gets passed down generations.
This is a time I really wish once again you watched frickin' Ted Lasso. And I don't know how many times we have
I
to have this.
started the other day and then I
Okay.
got distracted.
I need you to not be distracted. I know that it is not as traumatizing enough as your preferred shows. It's a little too happy for you. I
It's
understand
a
that.
little, I told Emily the other day, I was like, it's a little bouncy for
It's a little
me.
bouncy. Yeah, so I know it's a little bit too happy for you. But there is this really great there was a really great interaction you watch of this guy Nathan Shelley, who it like starts out as like the locker room attendant guy, and like and Ted Coach Lasso ends up like really taking a like to him, encourages him. He turns out to have great eyes and skills when it comes to coaching. He ends up as a coach, and you watch him go back and forth, desperately wanting his father's attention. The one day he's like on the front of the newspaper and his dad ignores it completely.
Ugh.
And he got this external validation from Ted Lasso, but then Ted Lasso starts like concentrating on something else that he has going on. And then Nathan's not getting it from him and he feels totally fucking crushed. And then because he's so fucking mad about this getting ripped from him, not realizing it's because he has displaced this from his own father, he ends up like fucking the team over. And there's like this whole other thing that happens, right? But it's actually a very, very good example about when external validation can sort of become risky,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because really what he did is he had put the needs he wanted from his father onto Coach Lasso, blah, 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 right? Here's the psychological part of it. And if you have been always wanting this from your parents, let's say that you grew up in a house that you only got complimented from your parents. If you like lost a lot of weight or you were really small, right? You're going to keep wanting that from people. Or if your grades were the best, or if you were the top of your sport that you played, or you took care of all your brothers and sisters and made your parents' life easier, you're going to keep replaying that.
Yes.
So what is the need? What is the point of why we're doing this? What am I getting out of it? And is it actually working?
And how do I start to give that to myself? Right.
Yep.
Because if you never received it from your parents and you're never going to receive it from your parents because of their wounds,
Mm-hmm.
that inner child work is so important to be able to do so that you can start to explain to your inner child that you not receiving that was not about who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
You are not deficient in some way. It is not important for you to achieve in order to have worth. You inherently have worth.
Yeah.
And just because your parents could not give that to themselves and therefore could not give that to you, does not mean you cannot start to give that to yourself as an adult. And that is where the reparenting your inner child comes in.
Yeah.
And so to think about what kind of validation did I need from my parents that they're not going to give to me? And how can I start giving that to myself? What does that look like for me? Is it to be able to tell myself I do still have worth, even if I'm not achieving in some way? Is it to tell myself I have worth no matter what my body looks like? Is it to tell myself I have worth whether I'm in a relationship or not? Right? To be able to tell yourself over and over and over again, I inherently have worth for just being who I am, is reparenting your inner child in a
Yeah.
way that's going to really help you. And it just takes some time.
We have to get to Dear Em and Jen.
I'm ready. Well,
Dear Em and Jen, why am I always comparing myself to others? I'm deciding if I'm going to have an only child and constantly looking to find others to validate my decision. Did Nikki fucking choose this question on purpose? This is rude.
does it feel like a personal attack? Are you feeling personally attacked?
Yeah, you can answer this one.
Oh God. You feel a little activated?
Um, uh, yeah, I feel like choosing to have an only child is like seen as selfish in some ways, a way that like choosing to be child free is.
Mhm.
The same way that you get the reason you're comparing yourself to others is because it's true. Like this, there's something that feels inherently wrong about this, right? It sounds like you're saying like this feels like maybe selfish, self-centered, like any of those things. Like there's some narrative about what making the decision means. I think similar to like being child free, because you actually get a lot of comments from people. The amount of people that say, like, well, don't you want Millie to have a sibling? And then I say, well, I've tried and I've had 4 fucking miscarriages. Um, they're like, well, have you thought about other ways? What about adoption? Right? Like people are so quick to be like, well, what about this other thing? Don't give up. And it's like, well, wait a second. Like, why? What would be so bad at having only one child?
Right.
And so when you compare yourself to others, it's because I'm trying to like feel like I'm fucking okay.
Yeah.
I'm trying to feel like I exist and fit somewhere and I'm not seen. Because also when you're not that, I think there's an interesting thing that happens, right? You have one kid and you feel different than child-free people, and then most of those people end up having more kids, and then you feel like you don't fit in with child-free and you don't feel like you fit in with people with multiples. And
Mm.
so at the end of the day, none of us want to be isolated. And that's the fear, right? Like I'm alone and I'm isolated and I'm lonely because like it is like a weird experience. So we compare ourselves to others so we don't feel so fucking alone and figure out where the hell we're doing and why we're doing this.
And, people tend to make comments specifically about like big life choices that are different than their own because it brings up a lot for them, right? That they made this specific decision. Um, and so the idea that you would make a different decision, they start projecting their own stuff. And so in a decision that is already so big, to hear someone say, oh, well, you are in this category and you are alone if you don't have another child,
Mm-hmm.
can further make you feel even more isolated.
Yeah.
Whereas it's completely okay to make a decision for yourself and your family and and separate it out from what would be right for someone else.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So thanks for listening to today's episode of Shrink Chicks. I'm going to give you a ton of external validation. You are great. You are grand. You're wonderful. Thank you very much for listening to Shrink Chicks. I'm so great. I'm so proud of you. It was amazing.
So good.
Once again, we have immediate openings in California. We would love to connect you with our amazing new therapist, Alyssa. We have some openings in Westchester, Pennsylvania.
We're gonna
Not
have we're gonna
soon.
have
Yes, soon we have some new hires.
they're
Yes.
coming in.
Still some Rittenhouse all over. Lots of, now there's even more states that, like, if I tried to list them
No,
now, it
you
would
can't
take
say
up this
all of
entire
them.
thing. There's too many.
Reach out, fill out a contact
Yes,
form at
there's
the
so many
therapy
fucking
group,
states now. Yeah.
and we can let you know if
Yes.
we can set you up with one of our incredible therapists, and if not, we can give you referrals.
Yes,
to
we have
someone
tons of
else.
referrals. We don't try to send anyone away. Hey, you can always follow, subscribe, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever the heck you listen to this stuff. We hope you continue. Follow us at ShrinkChicks. They're the therapy group. You can always check out thetherapygroup.com to find a wonderful therapist, like we mentioned before. And don't forget that to grow yourself, you got to know yourself. We'll see you next week.